Yeah, I know. It's a few days into January already, but life happens. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my life update because I've made a kind of big change for this New Year's. Um, but I want to kind of tell you about it a little bit later because it has to do with my reading goals for 2020. And you might think, what on earth? What? What do you mean? Your changing life has to do anything with your reading goals for 2020? But you'll understand when I'll tell you later on. But first of all, I want to talk about how did 2019 go. I had a video a year ago where I talked about my reading goals for 2019. I also showed you that I started a brand new reading journal, and I was thinking that I would do a little bit of an update on both of those. So here's my reading journal. And I started out, as you might remember if you were following me back then. I'm not sure. But I had this here. 2019 reading goals. I was even trying to make it a really nice thing here. So I started out and I was quite pleased by my first couple of months. But to be honest, I see all these bullet journals around or like planners and journals and stuff like that, and people are so good at making them. I am so impressed. I wish I was as good at drawing, at making letters, like, letters, at writing style and stuff like that. But that is not my talent. I'm good at a lot of other things, but that, not so much. So I can show you later on in this, like September, October. But that's another thing. It's like I read and I update on Goodreads. You can follow me on Goodreads if you want. There's a link in the description box below. But I always update on Goodreads, and then I was going to because I'm not very good at writing immediately in my journal which book I read. So for September and October, I managed to put that book down for September that I actually read for October, really beginning of October. So it looks like this. Not very pretty, to be honest. Also, I'm kind of a little lazy. And I'm not really good at the whole thing. So December was a really good reading month for me, that you probably know already if you follow me here. Because I made two reading wrap-ups in December. It's one halfway and then one at the end. So December was a really good, it was probably my best reading month of the year, but I also often do read more in December for some reason than I do other parts of the year. July or August, it depends on. But the month when I am on holidays, I also can have good readings months. It depends on how tired I am. In August, I had my holidays, but we went to Worldcon, which was, of course, a blast. It was wonderful. It was so much fun to meet authors and get books signed and meet people, but OMG, it exhausted me so much. I am an introvert. I tend to say that I'm an outgoing introvert, which might sound a bit confusing, but I use a lot of energy when I meet people. So I like spending time on my own. I need to spend time on my own. Fortunately, I have a partner who's also an introvert. That goes very well because we can do things together. We can. One of my favorite things to do together with my partner is actually to read, because I have a reading partner. I love having a partner who's a reader as well. I love my partner for many reasons, but yeah. Anyway, So yeah, December was really, really good. I read like a total of 10 books. So my goal for 2019, as you might remember, was reading at least 50 books. I was going to read at least 15 books in Norwegian. I was going to read 3 non-fiction books and at least 2 poetry books. And at the end of the year, I wanted to be down to at least 5 books at once, because I'm not very good at reading just one book at the time. I don't really do that. And I started doing that goal 2 years ago, I think, for 2 years ago. And the reason for that was that I was thinking it was like 2 years ago, but I think it was like 2 years ago. 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I was reading like, I think it was like 17 or 18 books at the same time. And that is a little bit too much, to be honest. It doesn't get me confused or anything, because I sometimes get asked, how can you read more than one book at the time? And I usually say, well, it's like following more than one TV series at a time. If you do that, you follow the story of that book, and then when you have the other book, you follow the story of that book. It's, I don't know. For me, it's not hard. It's just natural. So I managed to read a total of 53 books. I'm kind of thinking that it could probably have been better, but I think that the fact that I was so tired during my summer holidays had a lot to do with that. However, I have never read so many books in Norwegian at the same time as a grown-up. And the reason for that is that I read a lot of English books, books in English. I also read books in other languages, mainly Swedish. Sometimes Danish, not as much in Danish, to be honest, because I don't know why. But I think it's just because we're so close to Sweden, and I read Swedish books because I like Swedish authors, I guess. I don't know. I wish I could read Icelandic, to be honest. I think Icelandic's like one of the most sexiest languages in the world. It's an awesome language. So yeah, so I read 29 books in Norwegian. A lot of it was non-fiction, not non-fiction. A lot of it was contemporary Norwegian literature, especially like newer contemporary Norwegian literature, which I've never really done, to be honest, for grown-ups. But that also has an explanation. It has to do with what I used to do. I am a librarian. I still am a librarian, and for the last year and a half, I've been a adult librarian at a public library. And to be able to do book presentations and stuff like that, I need to read books for like contemporary Norwegian literature, basically. I also read 8 non-fiction books, which is a bit surprising to me. Most of them were probably Norwegian, I think. Can't quite remember. I might look back to my... I need to go through my Goodreads and just like scroll through it. I'm going to do that a little bit, because I need to talk a little bit about the books that I read. And I managed also to read 4 poetry books. So I exceeded my goals. And also, if you're wondering about like how many books I've read at the same time at New Year's, it was actually just 3. I'm now back to 4, but that's it. Just 4. So here's how it looks. My current reading journal, and this is like 2020 mål means goals in Norwegian, 2019, and oppsummering, or oppsummert 2019 oppsummert, which means kind of a summary of 2019, and where I listed my goals and how I kind of did that. I didn't do any like favorites or anything. I should probably do that for 2020 if I remember to. So my goals for 2020 I'm coming back to. Because I'm going to talk a little bit about the books I read. So the first book I read in 2019 was Girls Burn Brighter by Shubha Rao. And it was a really good read for me. I have seen mixed reviews on YouTube. And in general, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting. I have a thing for India, so that's why I liked it. I can't remember. Did I make a video on that book? I don't remember. I don't think so. But you know, I wrote a blog entry on it in Norwegian because I have a Norwegian book blog. And then I read Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman, which was also a really good read. That was also a really, really good read. I kind of think that 2019 was a really good reading year in general. I had a few like Norwegian favorites. There was a book called Kinderhår. I think it's a German word, so my German isn't really great. It's written by Maria Kjos von. Kinderhåre, is that the thing? Yeah, anyway. So I read that in January, and it was a really good read as well. I really, really enjoyed that. And that was one of the newer books. I think it was published in 2018. Of course, there was also books by Emma Newman. Emma Newman is one of my favorite authors. I read Before Mars in January. And I really, really enjoyed that. I also read The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal. If you don't know, it was the winner of the Hugo Awards, so I nominated that for the Hugo Awards. And I was really thrilled to get to see it win at Worldcon. And when I was at Worldcon, I also got the book signed by the author. That was really cool. I also got some books signed by Emma Newman, which was really cool as well. And then I read a book called Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, and to be honest, I was a bit disappointed by that because I've read her book Uprooted previously, and I really enjoyed that. So I thought it was kind of a letdown. I had expected more than this. And there was a lot of other stuff, and I also, before Easter, I tried to read some crime books, mainly because in Norway, Easter crime is like a big thing. A lot of people read crime books. Well, a lot of Norwegians read crime books in general, but at Easter time, it's kind of even more so, because it's like crime is like an Easter crime is like a thing. There's a whole story behind that I'm not going to go into at the moment, because that will make this video way too long. So I read The Taking of Annie Thorne by C.G. Tudor and Kastanjeman by Søren Sveinsrup, which I enjoyed both of them. I also read The Mitford Murders by Jessica Fellowes, which was like really cozy crime book. And then Easter came around, and I went to EasterCon, and I was so fortunate. I got to have tea with Emma Newman, and I felt like this really weird fangirl, and I didn't really know what. I was so nervous, but it was so nice to actually meet her and have tea with her. And I just bought Atlas Alone by her that just came out. So I started reading. I bought the book like the first day of EasterCon, and I started reading it, and I got it signed when I was having my partner and I was having tea with her, because I'm a patron, and I am a patron of hers on patreon.com, and And she had like this email where she sent an email and said, if there's any patrons who would like to, who are going to EasterCon and would like to have tea with me, please give me a shout. And I was sure there would be like loads of people wanting to have tea with her, and we would be like a huge group, and I would like sit there and be quiet. And but turned out that it would be only my partner and I, and my partner went to get tea, and that took like really, really long for some reason. Well, I know the reason, but I'm not going to go into it. But it took a long, so I was sitting there alone with one of my favorite authors, and I was like, But yeah, it was fun. And I also did a read along of Northanger Abbey, which I kind of posted on my bookstagram, my Instagram account. I'm hidden on a book, hidden in a book on Instagram as well. So please follow me there if you don't already. I haven't been as active. I find it really hard to interact with people because I don't know. There's something, I don't think my pictures really show up in other people's feeds. Because I have quite a few followers, but yeah, I don't get a lot of reactions or, and I'm not talking about likes, but like, I like to interact with people. I try to do that on other people's account, but I think there's a lot of people's picture who doesn't show up either. So that's a bit of me, but that's how it is. So yeah, lots of good reads this year. Oh yeah, and I got around to finally read Orlando by Virginia Woolf, which I really, really loved. Virginia Woolf is also an favorite author of mine. And Orlando is one of my favorite books. Yeah. And there were like also like some not so good reads, but quite enjoyable still, like for pure entertainment. Like I read A Country Escape by Katie Ford, which is like a chick lit book. When I bought it, I wanted something really light to read, and that's why I picked it up. And yeah, so it was okay. More Emma Newman Brothers Ruin. I need to read the next book in that series. And I reread a childhood favorite of mine, which was Anne of Green Gables. And I've read that like several times before, but I've always read it in Norwegian. So I decided that I would actually read it in English for the very first time. It's still one of my favorite books from my childhood. And I was kind of thinking, because it's, when you read books from your childhood that you really loved as a child, it's like you kind of think, oh, how has this kept? Has it aged? How will I feel? I was surprised. I actually really enjoyed it. Of course, it's kind of old-fashioned in many ways, but it's a book of its time. So I always keep that in mind when I read books. That there might be like books of their time, but hey, still quite enjoyed it. And then I read some other books, of course, and the first book of October, when I also had some time off and I went to a yoga retreat where I had quite a lot of time for myself. So I had brought 2 books, and I read I finished one book and I read a good portion of the other book. Because I was there for 4 days. And I also did like a lot of yoga and eating food and stuff like that. But the first book I read then in October was Aldri, Aldri, Aldri by Linn Strømsborg. And to be honest, that is one of my favorite books at the moment, or now. It's a book about not wanting to have kids, and I could really kind of recognize a lot of myself in the main character who doesn't want to have kids. I am 45. The main character in the book is 35. So I'm 10 years older, but I still can kind of see myself in a lot of her thoughts, which was interesting. Uh, Gushat by Salman Rushdie was one of the shortlisted Booker Prize. I don't really read. I haven't really paid much attention to the Booker Prize previously, but I did this year. I think that also had to do with my job. So I paid attention to that and I read it, and I had a long train ride, so I got to finish that in October as well. And I also, on the same trip, well, not the same trip, but I had one long train ride to southwestern Norway, and then I had a long trip back from southwestern Norway in October. And I then read Ungen by Aina Basso. Aina Basso is an author, Norwegian author, who I have followed for years since she first published her very first book, which was a young adult book about incest. It's a historical novel about incest back in the days and how the young girl gets the blame, even though it's her like stepfather who who's committing this crime, and she's kind of gets the blame, sort of. So that was very interesting. Loads of interesting reads. I read Becoming by Michelle Obama, which was very interesting. I read The Testaments by Margaret Atwood, which I absolutely loved. And I have a book review of The Testaments in one of my previous videos. You can go and have a look if you're interested. And there was so much interesting. I also read Marrying Anita by Anita Jane. I've talked about it previously. It was a disappointment, unfortunately. But yeah, so a lot of good reads. And The Desert Song by Amy, as I told you in my previous video, was the last read of the year. So a lot of good reads, a lot of fun reads. I quite enjoyed it, and it has been a very bookish reads with two science fiction conventions. And I go there with my partner. My partner is also a con goer. That's actually how I met my partner, at a science fiction convention. That's a few years ago now, but yeah. So, new year, people. Brand new year, brand new goals. I haven't read, when I'm filming this, I haven't finished anything yet, but I'm currently reading 4 books, as I said. So, goals for 2020. So the usual read at least 50 books. I tend to do that every year. I think it's a good goal. It's approximately 1 book per week, with a little slack. If I read more, that is a bonus. And I am going to read at least 15 books in Norwegian again. And my next goal is to read at least 5 young adult books by a Norwegian author. And now you might be wondering, that is a very specific goal. And yes, it is, but I have a brand new job, and I started my job on the 2nd of January. 1st of January in Norway is a public holiday, so we're all off. Everything is like closed, and what a day. It's like Christmas Day in Ireland, basically, almost. Not quite as bad, to be honest, but when it comes to closed things, and because we have public transport on New Year's Day, but most things are like, even finding an open cafe is like really, really hard in Oslo, which is the capital. So I started my new job on 2nd January, and I am still a librarian, but in a new public library outside of Oslo. I have now a full-time job. Yay! I've been working part-time, 80%, 30 hours per week, for the last 4 months. The last 4 months of 2019, and to be honest, it's not good for me. It's very hard. Not so much because I don't work, but especially economically, because I have the same, expenses. as when I worked full time. So I wasn't happy about working part time. I can't work part time, and in addition to this, so I was working like first 100%, then it was cut by 20%, and then and a full time, like say 5 days a week, full hours, and then I got one day taken away because that's 20%, and full hours, and then I didn't have, well, I had 60% was like, so that is 3 days was like permanent position, and the rest was like a temporary, and so that was like until September next year. And I didn't know if I could, like after September next year, if I was even having a more job then. So it would be like only those three days, or 60%. And I would not be able to have my expenses and work just 3 days a week. That wouldn't go, no, that wouldn't work. So I had to look for a new job again, and I was fortunate enough that there was an opening at a library where I worked previously, and I really loved it there. So I applied, and I was like crossing my fingers and hoping that I would get a job, and I did. So I know a young adult librarian. So my reading goals for 2020 is of course colored by the fact that I'm now going to work as a young adult librarian. I'm also do system admin stuff, because I'm good at that. So that was that is a really happy. I'm really happy about that. I only been there for 2 days, but looking forward to staying there for hopefully years and years and years. So, and I'm also going to read, onto my goals again, I'm also going to read at least 2 poetry books, and I would see if I can oh, right. Yeah, read at least 2 poetry books that fits young adults. And I have the last goal for 2020 is to read at least 2 non-fiction books, and at least of them should be like fitting for young adults. So that's my reading goals for 2020. As for my reading journal, I am going to make it much simpler. So I have started January, it says there January. It's not going to be very fancy because I'm not very good at that. And I use too much time trying to figure it out, and just no. So that's that. I would love to hear your thoughts on the year that passed. What did you read? Did you have some favorites? How many books did you read? How did it go? Did you have a good reading year? Was it an awful reading year? Or was it? Also, what's your goals for 2020? I would love to hear that. So that's it for now. Yeah. So I will see you in my next video. Bye now.